Hello, Endersword here again, this time with a video on Armadas and Armada crewing. I promised I'd do this in a previous video, and there's been a lot of Armada events this week, and I'm sure there will continue to be in the future. So something that I see a lot is that people use the same Armada crew regardless of what they're fighting, and they don't really adjust it up based on what type of Armada target there is, or like who they're fighting with, or anything like that. And there are adjustments that you can be making depending on what you're fighting, obviously whether it's a group one or a solo one, but even the different types of things. Is it an Eclipse? Is it regular? Is it like a FKR Armada versus a Cardassian Armada? Things like that are pretty important. So wanted to go over a few of the most common officer setups, but wanted to outline first what the three kind of archetypes of the Armada officer are. The first is a defensive officer, which basically increases your mitigation or somehow increases your survivability. So there's ones that increase what your stats are going to be on the mitigation. That's your shield deflection, armor, and dodge. And there's things that increase the shield regeneration that you have. Again, those are officers designed to keep you alive longer during that fight. The second is the officer that does essentially the opposite, which is tries to tear down the mitigation of the enemy armada or increase your ability to pierce through that mitigation. So these are kind of offensive stat-minded officers that are looking to undermine your target in some way. The third are things that outright give you extra top-line damage. So either allow you to fire extra shots, increase the damage of those shots, increase the critical chance that you have, or increase the critical damage that you do when you do hit a critical hit. So those are broadly the three types, and we're going to take a look at a few of the most popular ones. The first crew, which is pretty generic and can be used across the board, is going to be the 5/6 con crew. The way that this one works is your 5 is going to provide all the defense for the ship. So increases the shield deflection, armor, and dodge by 600% when it has the one synergy from 6 of 11, is 200% by default, but increases that 400% based on the officer next to her. And also gives you a loot bonus for this ship. Will receive 80% more stuff. Again, not a true 80%, but a scopely 80%, where it's varied by other things as well. The 6 of 11 is going to be on the wing. The way that he works is that he's going to increase the piercing that your ship specifically does. And the longer the fight goes, the more impactful this is going to be. So when attacking an Armada target, every time the ship hits the opponent with a weapon attack, will increase the accuracy, armor piercing, or shield piercing by 30% of the total attack on your ship. So every time that you hit with a unique weapon, some fire multiple shots, blah, 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 every time a weapon hits, you're going to increase it by the 30%. So basically, the longer the fight goes on, the more your ship is going to get through the defenses, through the mitigation of that Armada target. So this is really valuable against things that have high defense stats to begin with, and yet will last a long time. So if you know that a fight is going to be like 6 rounds, 10 rounds, 12 rounds long, then this can be a really good officer for it, because this is completely cumulative throughout the duration of the fight. The con is also going to be cumulative throughout the fight. However, obviously a critical hit chance can only go as high as 100%. So every time that you get hit by a weapon attack, then it's going to add a 5% chance. The way that that works is pretty crucial. So every time you get hit means if you go through a round and you don't get hit, it's not going to increase. If you go through a round and you get hit multiple times by multiple weapons, it's going to increase by more than 5%. So again, this is something that in the longer fight is definitely going to add to your pre-existing chance and max you out at 100 eventually. If you get into a 12-round fight, you're probably going to hit criticals 100% of the time. But if it's only like a 3-round fight, he's not really going to help you that much. It's going to do a little bit, but it's not right out of the gate strong. It gets stronger as it goes along as he increases the chance. So this again is a generically good one, and it's good against those mid to long fights, and provides the extra benefit that 5 gives you extra loot from what you're dealing with. So you want to kind of stack this one with as much health as you need to be able to max out your mitigation at 71.2%. But your real focus here is getting your attack up so that you're eventually getting through that enemy mitigation a lot sooner and a lot stronger. Flip to crew number 2. This is another one that's almost really good across the board, just generically quite strong. Is going to be the Cisco, Miles O'Brien, and Changeling Kira crew. A key to this one, it is something that's accessible to free-to-play players. If you just do your Dominion Armadas, these come in the packs. The sourcing is really good. You kill Armadas to get credits, you redeem them, you just automatically get these officers. I've got the 2 wingmen maxed out and Cisco at tier 4 without spending anything. These are really great officers, and it's something that should be accessible to everyone. The way he works, similar to 5 of 11, you're going to have the increased defense right out the gate, and is actually quite a bit stronger than 5 of 11. So if you're not quite maxing your mitigation, he could be a lot stronger in doing that. And the way he works, different than Khan, is it's going to be a flat percentage every round. At tier 4, 8% every round, obviously lower if it's lower, but he's going to apply whether you get hit or not. So if you're doing an Armada with like 5 other people, then you may not get hit some rounds entirely. He's still going to increase it. So he's going to be a little bit better and a little more consistent at increasing what your critical hit chance is. And then obviously as you level him up, like 8% at tier 4 versus 5% for Khan, probably is going to add up a fair bit quicker. The way that Miles works here, his phrasing on this is a little weird. For 3 rounds, Miles has a 50% chance of increasing shots against an Armada by 100%. The wording there is a little odd. I don't know if they say it the same here. I think they mean Miles has a 50% chance of increasing shots against an Armada by 100% for 3 rounds. Instead of the way that they say it, which implies that for the first 3 rounds or for 3 rounds he has this chance. He has this chance, and if it triggers, then it lasts for 3 rounds. So basically it's pretty good. Overall, he increases the shots that your ship is firing by 100%, which is quite excellent. And then Changeling Kira is the one that works very similar to 6 of 11, but works for everybody, and that's really the key. So while your 6 of 11 works for your ship, it increases the piercing that your ship does. This reduces the deflection, dodge, and armor of the Armada itself by 35%. Of the attack every time you hit it with a weapon. So they've got a similar trigger. They do a similar thing, but it's not symmetrical because the Kira one works for everybody that's there. So you are lowering it on the target. So other people with you are also getting that benefit, whereas with 6 of 11, only you are getting that benefit. Only the ship that he is actually on is going to get that benefit. So when a lot of people bring Kira, you've got like, say, 4 Kiras in the Armada, then it's going to really, really add up to a lot as it takes a lot of shots. And that's actually why Kira was originally broken, that she would lower the mitigation of the enemy Armada to 0, and then the game was essentially trying to divide by 0, and it would just crash the Armada and not actually work. But this is a really, really good generic crew for a lot of things, so keep that one in mind. One that's a little bit more specific is going to be the Kirk, Spock, and Khan crew. Now, what this is really good for is when you're fighting targets that may have a lot of health but don't do a whole ton of damage on the output side. So the best example of this is going to be the Eclipse Armadas. So where you're usually fighting with a Stella, and the Armadas themselves have a lot of hit points, at least compared to what the damage of a Stella is doing, but they don't hit you very hard. So you've got officers that are essentially almost outsized. They're meant to be fighting bigger things than this, but now they're fighting these kind of like dinkier targets meant for a specialty ship. So the effect that you can get out of Spock is actually a lot stronger than kind of is intended. So the way that this works is that Kirk is going to inspire morale, 80% chance of morale for 2 rounds when he's maxed out. And then your Spock maxed out is going to improve or restore the shield health by 750% of your defense for each round, basically, every time that you have morale. So he is going to be pumping into your shields something like 500,000 for my ship, extra shields to it. But a Stella target, even at epic level 41, can't do that much damage anyway. So your shield is essentially going to be infinite, and it's never going to get through it. You're going to finish the fight no matter what with max shields, and then con is going to improve the crit chance that you have. None of these officers is going to improve the defense of your ship, like the actual stats of it, but they're going to keep the shield up 100% of the time. And it simply takes so long for the Eclipse Armada to get through that you're basically going to live through the fight. At this point, I could send a Stella out with this crew, not fire a single shot, and after 100 rounds, the Stella would just still be alive, even if I was alone. So it's just that sort of survivability to it. What you can do now as well, if you do need the extra defensive, that you're not mitigating the max amount, is you can actually put in Tom Paris, who is a relatively new officer with this Voyager arc, and what he does in his below deck ability is add those defensive stats. So he works very similar to a number of other officers, where he's going to take 250% of your defense and add it to your defensive stats, but he can do it from below deck without actually taking one of these officer spots. So now you've got all the shield regeneration, you've got your defense, and you've got your critical hits, and you basically get a Stella that can just keep getting hit and hit and hit and hit. And it's not doing the biggest damage output in the world, but it will eventually kill it because it's basically immortal, is kind of the idea there. Another crew combo that is relatively new is the Voyager stuff, and some people have been flipping around what to do with these, and I kind of have my opinion. I don't know that it's 100% locked in stone, and I still expect to get another Voyager couple of officers this coming month as well, so it may be outdated in like a week, but basically setting up as Chakotay, Janeway, and Torres. And the reason for this, basically the captain ability for Chakotay to me is the strongest one, which is increasing the number of shots that your ship does by 100% against armadas. So very similar to what Miles O'Brien does, but there's no chance of failure here. It's just 100%. It's going to work every time, and he's going to double the damage shot output that you do. Janeway here is going to then increase the isolytic damage that you do against hostiles or armadas by 10%. Isolytic damage bypasses the mitigation checks of your opponent, so this could be a ton of damage. Even though 10% doesn't sound like a lot, remember it's mitigating 71% of your normal damage. So if 10% of that normal damage is getting right through, but doesn't have to go through that 71% check, then 10% damage is really effectively an extra 30 to 33% damage on top of it that is actually going through. Then Torres herself, what she does is every time you take damage from a non-player hostile or armada, B'Elanna increases the armor piercing, shield piercing, and accuracy by 250% of attack. This is very similar to what 6 of 11 was doing, that it is increasing your piercing ability. So just on this ship, not for the entire group, but for you. But instead of doing it by 30%, at a max 6 of 11, a tier 1 Torres is doing it 250%. However, unlike 6 of 11, instead of it being cumulative for the entire duration of the fight, it is only going to be for that round. And this is a little odd because if you fire first, then you don't get it. And if you kind of get hit at the end, then would it apply to the next? They should have made this 2 rounds, in my opinion. I know why they didn't, but it means that this may not always apply. It kind of depends the order in which you're hit and firing a little bit. And the fact that it's cumulative for that round. If you get hit multiple times that round, then it will add up, but it is not cumulative for the whole fight. And again, it doesn't apply to the whole party, but that is still a significant amount. Even if you get only a couple shots through after you get hit, then that can certainly be impactful. And it rises. This is, again, tier 1. That's going to go up as you tier it up. The other options you have for this one is the Doctor ability has the defensive stats. So you'll notice none of these guys had anything defensive. So I've seen people doing this to put the defensive officer into the main crew. This, again, is where I would suggest Tom Paris, is if you can put your defensive officer below deck, then you don't have to really waste this spot with the Doctor. His is decent. Like it will still give you, it's based on when you take hull damage again. So, and then works for 2 rounds. So you have to take a shot first, and then he's going to increase your defense. But Tom Paris below deck does not require that you take the shot first. It's not limited by a certain number of rounds or anything. It's just there from the start, and you get that extra damage to it. So if you do have him, put him below decks, and I would kind of go this way. We've seen people doing this, putting Janeway as the one as captain, and then putting either Torres a Doctor or Torres and Chakotay on the wings. The reason they're doing this is because of the shield mechanic, that she has extra mitigation to the shields once your ship has been hit. The reason I don't really like this, it's meant to be once you get hit, she will then make any subsequent hit you get be 100% to the shield. So with synergy here, she's 6%, +7 is 20. Your natural mitigation is 80 to begin with, so she raises it to 100. So when you get hit, the next time you're hit in that same round, you're going to absorb that completely into the shields and none of it go to the hull. That works really, really well for hostile grinding. The reason it doesn't work as well for armadas is because you're very likely to only get hit once in an armada round if you're playing with other players. That the shots are going to be divvied out randomly or to other people. So the odds of you getting hit 2-3 times and really getting benefit out of that are a lot lower. So I do prefer the idea of the Chakotay in the middle. You get the extra shots directly out of them. And then he is also your critical officer here as well, that he increases the chance of the critical hit chance of your ship by 12% for 2 rounds each time you score a hit. So basically he can raise that up from like 12, 24, 36, depending on the firing pattern of your ship. And that's just going to kind of keep rolling because it lasts for 2 rounds and it's going to just continue each time you get a hit in. So I think he's really good, both for the extra shots and the crit. He's kind of your main offense here. And then you can have your defense below decks and then B'Elanna helping out. The other one, this is kind of an older one that I wanted to touch on, which is the Picard, Riker, and Beverly. And this one, again, you get some variation. The way that this is supposed to work is that Picard's officer ability makes it so that captain ability, makes it so that the other officer abilities have an enhanced effect. So he works very similar to Pike does with Pike Moran Cho, Moreau Chen, whatever I just said. Pike Moreau Chen, where it enhances what the other officers do, in this case with an Armada focus, that he can be used there, and he gives extra crit damage as well. So this can then help bolster the officer abilities of the others. So instead of doing 250% bonus to the Federation targets, it's going to more than double that against those targets. And then Beverly Crusher is going to have 300% defense. Again, it's going to more than double that. So 300% may not be able to get you to the max, depending on your level and ship and so on. But by having him enhancing that, boosting that, it may end up pushing you over. The other way to do this, though, is basically to switch to Will Riker in the middle. and his captain ability is that he's going to increase weapon damage by 100% every round cumulative. So again, for longer fights, this is potentially going to be a lot better, and particularly if you're not fighting against the Federation target, say that you're fighting against a Romulan target, then you may end up doing this, where Deanna Troi is giving you an extra bonus to Romulans. He's now adding something every round to your damage, and then Beverly is providing you the defense. Is a way to go with it. So there's, again, a few variations there. These are a little bit more outdated because some of the new officers are a little better, and these are designed for those specific targets and often for longer fights. So there's better defensive ones now, there's better offensive ones, but this is something that I feel is accessible to a lot of players sometimes at a lower level when some of the other ones may not be, or you haven't gotten those officers yet. So this is definitely still viable, and you can end up crewing your ship specifically to the type of target that you're going to be looking at. The solar armadas are their own little thing. There you can often use the standard crews, but there are variations that you want to put in because there are some officers that work specifically against the solo targets. And two of the best are going to be Jadzia and Julian Bashir. So what I would tend to do is run on one ship the 5-6 con crew, on another ship the Cisco, Miles, and Changeling Kira crew, and then on the third ship is going to be Jadzia, Julian Bashir, and Lorca. The reason for this is going to be that Jadzia is probably the most offensive officer in the game. She has the ability to increase the shield piercing, armor piercing, and accuracy of your own ship by over 1,000% with the single synergy. And you could put another officer there, but I'll stick with the one, by over 1,000% right out of the gate. There's no ramping up. There's no for this number of rounds, anything. It's just strong right out of the start. And at tier 3, she also increases the weapon damage done of your ship against solar armadas by 650%. And both of them operate on the officer health number that you have on the ship. So you want to stack that. Then Julian Bashir is also very offensively focused, where he's going to increase the critical hit chance, and this is only at tier 2, by 25% against solar armadas. So she's just coming out absolutely swinging, and he's allowing you to hit criticals, even though the number is lower than Khan and Cisco will eventually get to. His out of the gate number, basically for the first 3 rounds, he's definitely going to be giving more than those other two do. It's just 25% right out of the gate, plus your ship itself probably has 22% on it. So 50% of the time, right from round 1, you're essentially hitting a crit. The third officer here is Lorca, which is going to be providing hull breach to the target. So this then applies to everybody, every other ship that's in there. So you've got 3 ships. If he puts hull breach on it, it increases the damage that critical hits do for everybody, for all 3 ships. And in a group armada too. If you've got Lorca or Gorkon to put hull breach on, if it's there for everybody. So whenever anybody hits a crit, then you're doing extra damage to it, or they are doing extra damage to it. So he's going to put hull breach. You're going to have something that is completely bypassing tons of mitigation on that target, and you're going to be critting half the time right from the start of it. This used to be vulnerable because you then didn't have any defense on that ship. None of these 3 officers has any defense to it. So before, I often ran Jadzia, Beverly Crusher, and Lorca just to put a little defense on the ship. But now, because of Tom Paris, who has really, really revolutionized, he's the only below deck defense officer. He has given the ability to turn these guys into complete offense with no regard for safety, and then he'll handle the safety from below decks by improving your mitigation there. So that's definitely super, super helpful, and it allows you to kind of change it up. When you use different ones and different ships depends on what you are fighting. And there's a couple I did just recently. that will give a decent example of what I'm talking about there. So here are Solar Armadas versus a Dominion ship. So this is one of the 60 epic ones, which is about as high as I can go. You can see 2 die and 1 halfway down. But the battle log for this is 14 rounds long. So in this fight, what I'm going to do is put the 5, 6, and con crew on the biggest ship that I have, the one that has the most durability, the one that's doing the most damage, because I know it's a long fight. And essentially the 6 of 11 there and the con there is eventually going to push my critical hit to 100%, and it's eventually going to push my piercing to, it's hard to tell exactly where you end up, but like 1,500, 1,800% by the end of 14 rounds. Whereas Jadzia comes out at 1,000 and Bashir comes out with a extra 25% hit, critical hit chance, but they don't go up from there. So they start strong, but they don't get better. Whereas the 5, 6 con starts a little bit weaker and then gets better the longer the fight goes on. So I'm going to put that on my strongest ship. On another Solar Armada, so similar situation, but a different target against the Borg spheres, everything hits way, way harder against them. They've got more HP, but the fight in this case is only 3 rounds long. So I'm going to flip what these, the crews are. So in this case, I'm taking that Jadzia Bashir crew right out of the gate that hits hard. I'm only going to last 3 rounds, so I just want it to punch as strong as it can and just completely kill the target. I'm going to move the 5, 6 con to my second strongest ship and put the Cisco one on my third strongest ship, which is now a Talios, because that does slightly better against the Borg crew. So making those sorts of adjustments are definitely key to kind of taking advantage and improving your survivability here too. And what that dovetails into as well is when you're doing group armadas with other people, you want to be considering how big is the armada, how long does it last, things like that. So Eclipse armadas, like I mentioned, tend to be more rounds. They just tend to have more health compared to what Stellas can do than if you go do a Federation armada somewhere. Those tend to die in a few rounds if you've got, you know, decent people in the armada versus those ones that string on. So you want there a crew that is designed for more durability to it to be able to survive everything, or you want to stack on a crew that is going to help everyone else. So going to do the Eclipse ones with like the Cisco, Changeling, Kira, and Miles is going to do a reasonable amount of damage, but the longer the fight is, she's going to help lower the mitigation for the rest of everyone else. But if you're kind of the lead hitter, if you're the strongest Stella in it, running the Kirk, Spock, Khan, especially with Paris below, means that you're kind of the one up front just taking the hits for everyone, and you know that no matter what, you're never going to die in that fight as long as you're continuing to regen shields faster than it's hitting you, or stronger than it's hitting you. It's going to take a long time to get through your hull. So that's definitely, yeah, something to consider. Look at the average duration of things, know whether you're punching up, kind of know what your position is in the Armada landscape, and then help out. The other caveat to it, I've got a whole video on this as well, the Cardassian Armadas, is there are certain officers that I didn't mention that are like Gala, that lowers the critical hit damage that an Armada does. Cardassian Armadas, unlike everything else, the critical hit does like 150% of a normal hit, but on the Cardassian ones, it does like 300%, 450%. So having Gala will lower the damage that those actually do. And having Troy as captain can lower the critical hit chance of an Armada. So if you're joining a Armada that you're kind of the low end of the totem pole, or kind of the weakest ship there, or particularly if you're, I know in a lot of cases, just to get to a warp range, you can't even bring your warship. You're going to have to bring an Amalgam, a Fisha, a Voyager, something like that, that just because it's the only thing that can get out there. It would be nice to stack on a crew that is really helping the rest of the team, because you're not going to do much damage anyway. But if you put on that team Troy, Gala, and Lorca or something, or Troy, Tasha Yar, Lorca, Troy, Nero, Lorca, something like that, you're going to be impacting that armada by providing it hull breach, by providing lower crit rates for that armada, by providing burning to that armada, you're going to be doing way more than your actual ship is doing by providing all these effects to it. So kind of know where you are, and there's definitely ways that you can help out even when you're not, you know, helping out on damage itself. You can amplify the damage of other people by putting these on and really help out your alliance in doing that. So I've talked a little longer than I wanted to anyway, but there's definitely other crews out there. I didn't touch on Eurydice or anything who can regen your shields as well, similar to a Spock sort of situation. There's tons of things out there, but those are the main things to consider: is the duration, the power of the Armada, your survivability in it, and so on. So hope that helps people. I may do a follow-up if there's still more interest, and take care.